My name's Anna Jordan and I'm a playwright. I'm also a screenwriter and a director, facilitator, some other things. Well, I was sort of a Paines Plough groupie for a long time. When I first started writing, I sort of was in my mid to late 20s and I'd left drama school, and so as an actor, Paines Plough always really kind of interested me in terms of the sort of work that they were creating. And then meeting with James and talking with James, and then we did pop music, and that was just one of the best moments of my career, which was an hour-long play set in the last hour of a wedding disco with two single people who are the only ones left on the dance floor. And I think James put a lot of faith in me because I was trying something completely new. And essentially what the show was, it has this fantastic soundtrack of like songs from the 80s, 90s, noughties, and whatever we call the rest of the time that we've been alive. And most of the text is threaded through the songs, in rhythm with the songs, in a kind of spoken word. And I was in constant contact with James when I was doing the writing, and I actually did quite a lot of the writing at Paines Plough at the old building. And then we were making the play in the room with the actors as well. We've just opened Lost Atoms with Frantic Assembly, and I've had a similar experience with Scott Graham, the artistic director. He actually came to me with the sort of concept or the provocation for Lost Atoms, which is this play about love and memory. And if you've got a really good collaborative relationship with a director, you realise that you can fail. You can say, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's right here. And you can sort of do that together. And it's a very sort of healthy place to be. So it's really, really key relationship, My experience of like deciding to become a writer was I was working on a play that was set, like a site-specific play that was set on an estate in a tower block that was about to be demolished. And it was called Home, and it was an incredible piece set in this tower block. And we did lots of research, sort of talking to, there was like maybe 5 residents left in this block, so it was weird and really eerie. And we went to talk to those residents, and they told us lots of stories about the estate, but also kind of like interesting like urban myths and stuff. And I was just really interested in this idea about home and about your home being taken away from you, and what it's like to live in a building that's about to be demolished. And they also told these stories of people that used to jump, these kind of urban myths of people that used to jump from the top of the tower. Really sort of cheery subject matter. But I can see now, looking back, that I had massive inspiration, instinctively felt I wanted to write something, and did, like very, very quickly. But because I was really lucky in that I'd been to drama school, and LAMDA were willing to sort of let me use their space, and I had friends who were actors. And so what I was really privileged to have was I'd written my first script, and I'd gone, oh, well, now I want to see this. I want to see it. I want to hear how it sounds. And of course, most writers don't really have that. They don't have that ability to go, okay, I've done this, and now I'm going to see what it looks like. I'm going to hear it. I'm going to get it up on its feet. So I was really, really lucky. And actually, I directed that play and then went on to direct loads of my own stuff. And even though I loved writing, I think it was the directing that I really got a sort of fever for, if you like. And sort of in the 2 or 3 years that followed, I was like, oh, I'm much more interested in this side of it. I like more control. I like more, I think there is more control when you're writing in comparison to being an actor, because you can keep generating, even if that work's not necessarily being seen or read or produced, you can keep developing. And I think for actors, it's hard to do that, I think. So it took 2 or 3 years, I think, for the transition. And then any actors will know, like, the big decision is to come off Spotlight. And once you've come off Spotlight, that's it. You're not an actor looking for work anymore. And so when I did that, it felt like it was very sort of painless, felt really real. But my dad always says, you're doing what I wanted to do. And I'm like, well, you did what I wanted to do. So there you are. So my writing day, is like, if I'm being completely honest, it's something I'm quite wary to share, I guess, because something that I've accepted over myself over the past, couple of years is that I am in complete chaos most of the time. And I have a young son who's 7, and I co-parent him, and I'm spinning a lot of plates basically. And so I crave routine and I crave order, but I don't really manage to achieve it very often. And so my writing day might look like, it usually starts in a coffee shop after I've done the school run. But that's the only bit that looks the same every day, I think, really. I'll usually start work in a coffee shop, and then I'll go home and I might continue in my shed, or I might get sort of distracted and end up doing something else. And when I'm at the very end of a draft, I end up on the beanbag. I don't know why. It's like a weird, like I'll start at a coffee shop and then I'll be working in my shed, and then like I'm on the sofa. Sometimes I'm in bed, but for some reason I always end up sort of hunched over on the beanbag. And so there's no, I want more shape, I crave more shape, I crave more order, but I'm also learning to sort of go, this is how you work. But the ideal writing day would be spending time at your desk or wherever you're working, I'm working, for a length of time and getting a bulk of work done. So pages or scenes or however, words, however you want to count it. The truth is, what happens is I can spend a long time at my desk and not get very much done. Or I can spend not a lot of time at my desk and still get quite a bit done. But what I should say, this is a big shout out, and lots of other writers know about this already, but there's a organisation called London Writers Salon, which runs something called Writers' Hour. And they started doing it in the pandemic. And 4 times a day they meet on Zoom. So it's at, I think it's 8 a.m. in 4 continents, 4 time zones. So it's 8 a.m. in here. And then there's one at 1 p.m., which is like New York hour. And then there's one at 4 p.m., which is LA hour. I don't know if that's right, but something like that. And then there's one at 9 p.m., which is like New Zealand hour or Australia hour. And so essentially what it means is you can, for free, you can join and you can sort of pay a subscription. There's lots of different levels and lots of benefits, but essentially for free, you can write with 100 to 200 other writers for an hour, 4 times a day. So at 8 and at 1 and at 4 and at 9. And it starts off with like a little hello, and people, they sort of say hello, and some people share what they're working on, and then they sort of will give a sort of inspirational quote or some words of wisdom, and then we work for like 50 minutes and then we come back together at the end. And actually that has given me structure that I need so badly. And there's been times when I'll do the 4 writers' hours in a day if I can fit it in. And actually 4 solid hours writing a day that's a good day. So particularly for any writers that feel isolated or whatever, I really recommend it. It's Writers' Hour and it's London Writers Salon, and you can find them anywhere. But that really helps me. But yeah, an ideal day is feeling good, getting lots of work done, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not very good with routine, I think. I think for a new writer, something you'll be told a lot is to try to find your voice. And I think that's the sort of thing that people say and then often don't explain. And it will often leave people thinking, oh, I need to find my voice as a writer, but also not actually sure exactly what that means. And I think it's a really interesting, useful thing to talk about. Something I come back to again and again is you're on the right road, you're doing it right if what you're writing interests you. And that sounds like a really obvious thing to say, but actually we are so influenced by our peers, by what's happening in the world, by what other theatre companies, other playwrights, the work that we've read before, emulating other writers, that sometimes what actually interests us can get lost in this kind of noise of insecurity. And so I think a really useful sort of thing to keep checking in with is, am I interested in this? Like, am I engaged? Am I excited? Am I repulsed even? Am I frightened? And actually, it's only over the last couple of years in my career that I've started to learn, last few years maybe, like to be proud of the things that I enjoy and the things that I love, and understand that that's what makes me the writer I am. And for a long time, maybe like in my sort of early 30s, I went through this phase of thinking, like, God, I only listen to like shitty dance music on my running playlist, or listen to Kiss FM. And I think I need to be listening to classical music, or I need to be getting into some sort of more highbrow kind of music. I've got a really eclectic taste in music anyway, but I've always loved cheesy dance music and like house and garage and pop. Like, I've loved pop music. So here's me sort of berating myself and saying, no, if I want to be a more expansive artist, I should be listening to this and I should be listening to this. But I never would have written pop music if I hadn't have just gone, actually, no, I'm going to carry on listening to Kiss, or to listening to my running playlist, or the songs that I love with the big beats and the atmospheric stuff and the stuff that makes you want to move, and the stuff that was getting me like round the park or wherever it was I was running. And the idea for the play came from the repetition of listening to that music and going, some of these songs have defined my life. If I'd have gone, oh, I need to diversify, I need to be listening to stuff that other people might be listening to, or more highbrow stuff, I would have written that play. And so when you're writing that play, when you're making that play in your mind, at your desk, wherever you're doing it, follow things that excite you. And I think that's how you will find your voice, is like, it's following the stuff that interests and excites you. I think theatre is really distinct from film and TV, certainly. Like, working in both of those mediums, I see that more than ever. I mean, it sounds really obvious, but the immediacy of theatre, I think, certainly when you're writing for theatre and when you're writing for TV, there's a difference, because not only you may be writing something with ad breaks in for TV, but you also know that someone has a remote control in their hand and a phone in their other hand. In a theatre, you have more of somebody's attention. And I think that's really exciting, also terrifying. But it's that theatre exists. It's transient. Is that the word I mean? That it's, that it exists in the moment and then it's over. And I think, that makes it really exciting, I think. Moments of joy for me, I've talked and thought a lot recently, over the last few months or so, about being in flow state. So being in flow state, is something that's been talked about and written about a lot, and it's something that artists experience, but also not just artists, like sportsmen or all sorts of different other people experiencing this sort of sense of flow, which is where you are totally engaged in a task. That sort of time seems to slow down or speed up. You lose sort of concept of time. You're utterly focused. There are no distractions, and you feel really, really engaged with what you're doing. And as a writer, that's not something I experience very often. I'm a self-sabotager in so many ways. So, when if I'm working and I'm also Googling this, or like online shopping, or I've got like 30 tabs open, I'm checking my social media or whatever, it's not because I don't really want to do that, but it's a self-sabotage thing. There's very much a sort of a dialogue going on, sometimes quite sort of explicitly, between the negative voice and the voice that's trying to be sort of more reasoned and more positive. So when I do hit on flow state, when I do sort of suddenly go, oh my goodness, I'm working, I'm writing, with my play Lost Atoms, frantic assembly play that's just opened, I had several experiences of being in flow state when I was writing that. And I can honestly say, again, it sounds like slightly pretentious, but like when I'm in that state, I feel that the characters that I'm writing are showing me and telling me where they want to go, what they want to do, what they want to say, to the point that storyline is revealed to me. It's not stuff that I've planned. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what's happening here. And that's like magic. And sometimes that pays off for all the other horrible stuff. Also, just to mention, I really love mentoring. I see that as like, I've been mentoring quite a lot over the last couple of years, and I just had a really fantastic conversation yesterday. I find myself having these conversations and giving advice of stuff that I think, oh, I didn't even know I knew that. And that's actually really wise and clever. I'm going to try and live by that now. Moments of misery are, I think that it's the not writing. So it's knowing that I need to be writing and not writing. And actually that, I think it's known as demand avoidance, but that is quite big for me. And what it is, it's more difficult being a writer who isn't writing but knows they must begin writing soon than it is being a writer who's failing, messing up, finding it hard, but actually doing the work. It's only through doing the work that you can keep moving. And so the most miserable times for me are where I feel unable to write for whatever reason, but I really, really should be doing it. I'm very lucky in that the past sort of 5 years of my career, really, I've been offered some, I've been engaged on some really exciting projects and I've been working quite a lot. And I feel so grateful for that. What it means is that, the past couple of projects I've worked on have been ideas that have been brought to me and said, are you interested? How do you feel about this short story? What do you think about adapting it for TV? Or with Scott Graham coming to me with the ideas for writing Lost Atoms. And so I work well with a stimulus. I'm like, yeah, let's take that and run with it. But what I haven't had for quite a long time is that space to like dream and to think and to actually go, this is what I want to write. In the way that 8 years ago, I was listening to my running playlist over and over again and thinking, I want to make a play about these songs. I haven't had the space and time to do that. So I'm looking forward to, at some point, having more of an opportunity to have a bit of space and time. But music is a big part of what inspires me to write. And I'm going through a reading phase at the moment. So I'm reading quite a lot of novels, but I think it's, I think it's really important that other writers know that you don't have to read avidly all of the time to be a writer, because I've gone through periods of my life where I haven't read at all. And I think that it's almost a kind of snobbery to go, you must read all of the time, I think, you do what works for you. I think a thing that's really useful for me is that if I want to identify what is it actually that I'm interested in at the moment, and actually that's a really hard question for me to answer. When I first started writing, I could easily answer that question. And I think that morning pages, which I'm sure is something that lots of writers have spoken about, which is Julia Cameron's exercise from The Artist's Way, which is essentially writing freehand every morning, 3 pages of A4, I think, as much as you possibly can, whatever comes into your head, stream of consciousness. I write in a stream of consciousness a lot, and doing that regularly over a period of days, weeks, stuff starts to present itself to you. Images, repeated words, ideas. And I think that's really exciting, because you're not actively going, what's interesting me? You're going, I'm going to get everything out of my head down on the page and not even think about it. And that, to me, is the most kind of exciting way to identify what it is that is inspiring you. So when I was at the beginning of my writing career, or not the beginning, maybe 2 or 3 years in, desperate for a commission, desperate for any sort of attention or meaningful relationship with a theatre, but writing all the time, and sort of staging my own sort of rehearsed readings and little tiny events and stuff. And I went to a masterclass with the writer Rebecca Lenkovich, and she talked about appreciating the time when you're at the beginning of your career and before you have commissions, where you are writing on instinct, when you are like really bringing to the surface the things that most excite you and you think most deeply about. And I remember thinking, easy for her to say, I'm desperate for a commission. I wasn't making any money as a writer, not that, but like, I certainly wasn't able to make a living from it. And yeah, I remember feeling like frustrated, but, sort of probably 15 years later, maybe a bit more, she was right. That when I first started writing, I think I should have been a writer earlier, because when I started writing and when I properly kind of got into that groove, again, even though I wasn't being commissioned, but I was a writer, I was writing, I became a happier person, because it's like something had clicked into place where I was like, I think I should be doing this. If you only ever see your creativity, the growth of your creativity and how successful your creativity is, in like directly linked to how successful your career is, so how many people are reading, performing, how critically acclaimed your work is, how much you're getting shortlisted for. If you only see those two in correlation, then you're kind of destined for a life of frustration. You have to have a sense of, I believe, you have to have a sense of a relationship with the art that you're making, a relationship with your creativity that you protect away from perceived ideas of success and other people's kind of critical opinions. Because being creative and writing and making art is like a lifelong relationship, and it's a lifelong commitment. And I'm really influenced by the Elizabeth Gilbert book, Big Magic, which talks about forming a lifelong relationship with your art and committing to nurturing it, loving it and respecting it, even if it's not necessarily paying the bills or getting the sort of response or critical acclaim that you think it deserves. And I think that's really useful, because the world, society, this country is not designed to make life comfortable or easy for artists. And so you have to be responsible for protecting, nurturing and carrying your own art, because no one else is going to do it for you. So I think ways to get over writer's block. I think the first thing is not to believe that it exists. So in Peter Pan, every time someone says, I don't believe in fairies, a fairy dies. So I think every time a writer says, I don't believe in writer's block, I like to imagine that a writer somewhere gets unblocked and begins writing again. I think the reason that it's not useful to think about it in terms of being blocked, is because it presents us with a really binary state. We're either blocked and we're in trouble, or we're unblocked and we're sort of feeling fecund, which is my favourite word, and creative. And actually, there's a huge sort of grey area in between. It puts a huge amount of pressure on the idea of, when am I going to unblock? When's my creativity going to come back, and how am I going to do that? And situations that put us as writers under that sort of pressure isn't really useful, I don't think. So I think that's the first thing. I would say change your environment. So if you always work at home, try working on a coffee shop, try writing in a notepad on the top of a bus, you know, introducing novelty, which is just doing something different to make you feel a little bit different, is really, really useful, I think, and can sort of bring new stuff. Limitation. So if you are really struggling with something, a scene, let's say, get a timer, say, I'm going to write this scene in 5 minutes. It is going to get done. It doesn't matter how rubbish it is. And then set the timer and write the scene. I always think if someone had a gun to my head, I would do this. So I can do it. And then at the end of that, you're left with something which you might think is so awful, but at least it's something to kind of build from. So I think that, and I think also remembering the gun to your head thing is useful. Changing up your tools. So we tend to work on laptops. There's lots of other things available to us on laptops. Also, writing freehand is a completely different like sensory experience. Also, you know, we've got access to technology all the time that we can record our voices, which is like a whole different way to work, which can be so useful. So yeah, I think don't believe in writer's block. Don't kind of give it more energy than it deserves. I think change your environment, change your tools, look for novelty and look for limitations. And I'm sure there was more, but that's all I can remember at the moment.